Baldur's Gate 3 seems to be doing extremely well right now, coming in at the 4th highest rated PC game of all time. I myself have put 210 hours into the game, and I do intend to be playing it more as time goes on. Is it really that good? Would you enjoy playing the game? What is a CRPG anyway? Those are things that I'm probably going to be answering throughout this video. Before I go any further, I just want to make, a small little addendum here. I will not be spoiling anything at all. Anything I do spoil will be so small and inconsequential that I assure you it will not impact your ability to enjoy the game whatsoever. So what is a CRPG? A CRPG, taken literally, means a computer role-playing game. That can be anything like Skyrim, back to Baldur's Gate 1, back to Baldur's Gate 2, back to anything. It just means a computer role-playing game. The purists will say it is a game where you typically play with a party, with levels, with gear, played with a race, played with a class, played turn-based, with dialogue trees, with your choices impacting the game as you go along. That is effectively what Baldur's Gate 3 is. You choose a race, you choose a class, sometimes you have subclasses, and you have dialogue options. Sometimes you proceed through mandatory combat. The vast majority of combat is, in my opinion, not actually mandatory. Obviously, you will need a level and you will need to do things like that, but at the end of the day, the game is basically played like a role-playing game on your computer. What you're seeing in front of you is a sort of small subset of what exactly is happening here, right? We talk to some people. They tell us they want to whip these rams so they can get through the rocks. We then talk to the rams because I'm a druid that can talk to animals, and we, through passing some dice checks, get them to turn on the dwarves, and we attack the dwarves with them. Then we ask them at the end of that combat, can you break the rocks for us? And we proceed. And that is effectively how Baldur's Gate 3 is played, and that is effectively how I would describe a CRPG. The cornerstones of Baldur's Gate 3, the most important things, the things you'll spend 99% of the game on, are the combat, the items, and the dialogue. What I'm going to do now is critique all three of those things in that order. That's not how important they are, but I'm just doing it in that order because it makes the most sense. So we're going to go over the combat, then the items, then the dialogue. The combat system in Baldur's Gate 3 is effectively the D&D 5e system with some changes. It is very much not that complicated. You get to move, use an action, and use a bonus action once per turn. You also have a reaction. I'm not going to get into that. They're a bit more, not complicated, but not that important to know. My barbarian here has rages. Each class has their own resources. Most of them actually have unique resources. The unique resource here is Rage, which recharges once per long rest. I'll get into that later. Rage costs a bonus action and gives us more damage, and we take less damage. But we have to attack once per turn or it turns off. She has Reckless Attack as a barbarian. This gives her more chance to hit and crit on attack, but gives enemies more chance to hit and crit us. We're a barbarian, we don't care. Big damage, big damage. We attack because we're level 5, and attack action allows you to attack twice. We get to attack again. Big damage, big damage. That's a barbarian's turn. Rather simple. Barbarians are rather simple. I'm going to go through the turns of each of my characters once. I hope none of them get mind controlled, or else this might be kind of awkward. So that was a barbarian's turn. Not many things you can do. Berserker barbarians could do throwing actions and things like that. But overall, oh good, we saved the mind control. Overall, not that complicated. Here's a warrior. Warriors are a bit more complicated. They have superiority die. That comes back on a short rest. Superiority die allow you to do different actions on attack. I'm going to run up here. I'm going to try to use Menacing Attack to fear this guy. He was frightened. When an enemy is frightened, they cannot move, and they get disadvantage on attack, giving them a much lower chance to crit and hit. Now that he's frightened and we did an attack action, we're going to use Pommel Strike. That's a bonus action that we can use once per short rest. It can daze them, which reduces their AC from dexterity. So despite having 15 dexterity, his AC has gone down to 11. AC is effectively how hard it is to hit you. So now it is very easy to hit this guy. So that's a fighter's turn. That's a barbarian's turn. Oh, see, the superiority die allowed her to repost that. Since we had the die available, it was available. That's a reaction, by the way. Here's a mage. Mages get spell slots. The the higher the spell slot, the more powerful the spell you can cast on it. We only have 2 spell slots, 3, and they come back per long rest. Now, long rests are harder to find than short rests, so we have to be a bit cautious here. I'm not going to be cautious, and instead I'm going to check out a Fireball, because I want to check out a Fireball so you guys can see it. So that's his most powerful spell, and you can see big damage, big AoE, very good stuff. He can only use that twice per long rest, so that's kind of hard to do. I'm going to pull Gale over here so he doesn't get shoved into the lava, as does happen frequently. He mind-controlled my Paladin, so we don't get to see my Paladin. Well, screw you, Mind Master. That's generally the combat system. It's quite simple, it's quite fun, it's mostly going to be about using our items and our stats like that, okay? So it's a pretty simple combat system, it's fun, it's probably more complicated than something like XCOM, it's not as complicated as some other systems, but overall it's going to be a fun system where your turns can feel semi-impactful and you have to make decisions based on your available resources to get through situations. Now for some complaints about the combat system. One of my biggest issues is it feels like a downgrade from Divinity Original Sin 2. That was a game that Larian Studios made before Baldur's Gate 3. Divinity Sin 2 was made for a computer. D&D system was made for a tabletop. That means that Divinity was made to be more complicated to take use of the fact you had a computer running all the numbers. D&D is not. They do try to mitigate this issue by giving you lots of magical items that do lots of effects, but at the end of the day, having one action and one bonus action can often feel like you're not really doing that much on your turns. This does also help keep the game more balanced, I guess, but it can just very much does feel like a downgrade from Divinity. 2. This might seem like me being biased, but I think the fact that you must use Fireball to keep up with marshals is a bit of an issue. I think when they ported this game over to the computer from the tabletop, they should have taken a look at mage spells. Many mage spells at rank 1 and rank 2 are just not really that good. That means that Fireball as a rank 3 spell is extremely more powerful than any of the level 1 and 2 spells. And I don't mean, oh, it's like twice as good. I mean, it's like 5 times as good. It does like double the damage in a bigger AoE than any of a level 2 spell. This means that if you actually want to impact the game starting at level 5 as a mage, you have to be using Fireball. This kills diversity among spells, and it also kills turn diversity. It also means that when mages don't have Fireball, they tend to not do much. Now, I don't do the tabletop balancing, but as a person who doesn't play the tabletop, it seems a bit absurd to me just how bad your average mage spell is compared to Fireball. In fact, there's really only a couple good mage spells to begin with, and it kind of feels weird to me that there's only a couple good mage spells. The vast majority are just terrible. The CC ones are overall, they're decent, but dang. And there's a bit of a martial bias. Now this does go into the items, which we're going to talk about next, but as I mentioned earlier, items help increase this game's complexity and make it more fit for a computer game. However, because mage items are so much rarer than martial items, it can often feel like mages are just doing Fireball, Fireball, Firebolt, Firebolt, Firebolt. That doesn't, it's very hard to get a build going as a mage, whereas if you're a martial character, you just sort of throw items on. You're like, I'll take this one, I'll take this one. Greater leap distance, great, I love leaping. But it's hard to find mage items that help with this. The game lacks real difficulty after Act 1. Now this is something you'll notice in your second or third playthrough. As you start finding where all the magical items are and you start noticing how to build characters, it can feel like after Act 1 that the enemies aren't really giving you a fair challenge anymore. You make your characters pretty powerful, and even on Tactician difficulty, the enemies can really struggle to put up a challenge to you. Enemy diversity is fantastic. There are lots of different enemy types. They do lots of different aesthetics, different cool things. They won't reuse enemies all the time. It's fantastic. Enemy attack diversity is not fantastic. Enemies, the majority of the time, run up and try to hit you, and that's all they do. They very rarely have spells. They very rarely have cool conditions and stuff. You can find some enemies with cool auras, buffs, debuffs, things like that. Encounters that you need to smart your way through, stuff like that. But the amount of, let's say, scenery that you can pull down of enemies starts going down considerably. The amount of enemies with special auras starts going down. It feels like they kind of blew their load on Act 1 on making sure Act 1 was really cool. But then by Act 2, you will start noticing just how many enemies don't really have much interesting things to them. And I'm not saying it makes combat boring. It kind of does. They will break up combat very much for dialogue, iteming, scavenging, stuff like that. They very rarely send you through actual combat gauntlets. Very rarely do they do that. So they do keep the issues with combat down. But this does take us to the issue with items. Now, I want to talk about items. In particular, I want to talk about how cool the items in this game are, how interesting they are, and how very, very, very many there are. What you see in front of you is a vendor. This is a vendor that I've been selling magical items to for a while. Now, we can look at the magical items on Bot Drawer. What are these really cool magical items on Bot Drawer? This is at the end of Act 1. Bot Drawer has not entered Act 2. As a Dwarf Paladin, he has Grim Skull Helm. He can't be crit, he gets resistance to fire, and he can use a Hunter's Mark once per long rest. He has the Adamantine Split Armor. All incoming damage is reduced by 2, and whenever he's hit by a melee attack, the attacker is sent reeling for 3 turns. Enemies that are reeling have a -1 penalty on attack rolls for each turn remaining of reeling, so he's basically not going to be hit twice. He also can't be crit. Again. He has the Boots of Striding and underwear. Whenever he casts a spell that requires concentration, he gets momentum, allowing him to move much further. He also, when he is concentrating, he can't be knocked prone or moved against his will with a +1 to athletics. He has the legendary Blood of Lathander. He, once per long rest, when his hit points are reduced to 0, instead he gains 2 to 12 hit points, and everyone around him is healed 1 to 6 hit points. He sheds a holy light in a 6-meter radius. In combat, fiends and undead standing in the light are blinded unless they succeed a Constitution saving throw. It's a +3 weapon, and it can cast a sunbeam once per long rest, a very high damaging attack that blinds all enemies. He also has the Adamantine Shield. Whenever a melee attack misses him, the attacker is sent reeling for 2 turns. So if they hit him, they get reeling for 3 turns. If they miss him, they get reeling. Basically, no one is hitting Bot Drawer. Not more than once anyway. Additionally, his Shield Bash is a reaction. He can knock an enemy prone whenever it hits him with a melee attack. And he can't be crit a 3rd time. He's also got a cool bow here that gives him advantage against all monstrosity enemies, even with his melee attack. He, while concentrating on a spell, he deals an additional 1 to 4 psychic damage, which works well with these boots. He then moves 3 more with Crusher's Ring, and he's got the Ever-Seeing Eye. This allows him to cast protection from good and evil. Do you see how this build here is pretty cool? Do you see these items are powerful? And you're probably thinking like, ooh, I could do something with that. But then let's look over here at these items over here, the ones that are sold to this vendor. I just want to show you. This is where his movement goes unimpeded by difficult terrain. This gives you a free Scorching Ray once per long rest. This one, hitting an enemy with this weapon, heals you for 1 to 6 hit points, but you can go mad if you don't continue hitting an enemy on every turn, and it's a +2 weapon. This one is the Baneful. The blade's magical powers only function if it's bound to an Eldritch Knight or is a Warlock's Pact weapon. It gets a +1 bonus to damage and attack rolls, and if you hit an enemy, it banes them. Over here, we can see some cool magical items, a Dark Justiciar Mare. If you're obscured by shadow, you deal an additional 1 to 4 necrotic damage to attackers that hit you with a melee attack. Light of Creation. You have a chance to be stunned unless you're a construct, but you get 1d6 lightning damage on hit. Here we have Faithbreaker, which grants you the unique Absolute Power. Absolute Power gives you additional damage, doing 15 to 25 damage, which is way beyond my Blood of Lathander does 10 to 15. This special attack that you can use once per short rest does 15 to 25 with a d6 force damage and knocks enemies back 5 feet. Faithbreaker is pretty good. What do we have here? Sword of Screams, which does 1d4 psychic damage. This deals additional damage to burning targets. Do you get the point? There are so many cool magic items in this game. we look over here, I'm going to look over here at Shadow Hearts. Shadow Hearts items are pretty cool as well. We can see a Scale Mail +1, which is but here we can see Boots of Aid and Comfort. Whenever she heals an enemy, they heal an additional 3 temporary hit points. Here, whenever she heals one, they heal 2 hit points. So 3 temporary they get and 2 permanent they get. Additionally, whenever she heals someone, they get blessed, getting a 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws for 2 turns. Her amulet gives her an additional healing word once per long rest and an AoE mass healing word once per long rest. Then her weapon makes her blessed actually really good. Her blessed does a 2d4 to saving throws and weapon attacks and spell attack rolls, and she gets an additional bless once per long rest. That is extremely powerful. All of this is extremely powerful. You can imagine all the different things you could do. You can imagine how I've looked at all these different magic items. You can imagine how these magic items make so many cool different builds. But let's get to mages. Mages suffer. They struggle. Mages often don't have a lot. The most powerful mage item, and I'll start big here, is basically Psychic Spark. Whenever you shoot a magic missile, you get +1 magic missiles. So if you shoot 3, you get 4. If you shoot 4, you get 5. You also get an additional rank 1 magic missile you can use once per long rest. Then the Spell Sparkler. Whenever you deal damage, you get 2 lightning charges. You deal an additional 1 lightning damage if you have a lightning charge, and if an enemy, if you get 5 lightning charges, they're consumed, and then you do an additional d8 damage to your enemy. The problem is, Spell Sparkler and Psychic Spark are basically your best 2 mage items for Act 1, and I have struggled to find any better mage gear. This one is, you can't be electrocuted and resistance to lightning. This one is, you get light as a cantrip. That's sleight of hand. This is just armor. To be blunt, mages come up short really hard. Mages just do not seem to get much good gear whatsoever. I have tried, I have sacrificed, I have pleaded to God to find me good mage items, and I can't find them. I can find amazing items over here. Look at this, saving throw +1 safeguard shield, detect thoughts on anything. My defender flail, it's a flail that gives me +1 AC, and if I miss an attack, they take bludgeoning damage, and it reduces the amount of bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage I take by 1. Great items, cool items. Everything for fighters and these characters is just so cool. There are so many cleric bless heal items as well. You can make so many cool different builds. It's actually crazy. The only downside here, and this is actually a big downside, one, well, mages just kind of seem to get crapped on. Mages in Act 3 do get some stuff, I will say that. But 2, probably the bigger issue, Tactician difficulty really struggles to offer enough challenge to actually make these magic items really needed. I guess I'll put it that way. Once you start getting all these magic items, you might find yourself getting bored with the game because, well, you know, to be honest, what do I need this to beat? Probably not a lot. I mean, I'm already crushing everything. And some people like that, and some people don't like that. Do you want a power fantasy? Do you want to crush people? Good. If you're looking for a balanced gameplay, though, it can often feel like building a half-decent character already crushes the content. Could you impose restrictions? Could you do that stuff? Maybe. But the item system on its own is extremely good, and I will give it that. I'm very excited to find items. I love finding magic items. I love looking around. There are so many throughout this game. There's so many quests, there's so many chests, there's so many ways to find different items that you might not know that you ever had. You could do a 3rd run and finally be like, oh my god, I didn't even know that was there. And that's kind of crazy when you think about it. There's just so much to do in this game. There's so much to find. You can get your dex to 18 off these items. You can get wrath every time you get hit with this item. This one just gives you more jump distance, which on a character who can already jump pretty far, I mean, this is a pretty big jump. And that's when you can grab arrows out of the air with this one. This one, your attacks, your throws do more damage. So there's just so much good stuff with the item system. I'd actually say the item system is 2 thumbs up, no complaints, other than I really did not spend enough time on mages, definitely, but also rangers and druids. Now, I can give them the benefit of a doubt on druids. Druids are the only people who shapeshift, and because of that, they kind of got the lack of content, let's call it that, because they do shapeshift, which means they have to get special shapeshifting items, which means every item for them needs to be a special shapeshifting item, which means they would need to deliberately be putting out content for only one class. On the other hand, oh my god, I forgot how many items there are in this game that do so many cool things. On the other hand, there are a lot of items from monks, which are the least popular class, I think, on tabletop, right? Or one of the least. So it can feel a bit, favoritist. There's nothing wrong with favoritism, I suppose, but, you know. So the item system, 2 thumbs up, absolutely fantastic.
Down, down, down by the river.
Now, for this dialogue section, what I do mean is story, dialogue, atmosphere, all of that will be discussed within this section. Now, I'm not going to be spoiling anything. I will be critiquing the story as a whole, but I will not be spoiling anything. I will go over the Druid Grove in light detail in the upcoming area, but the Druid Grove is the very first area you do after the tutorial, and nothing I'm going to spoil is going to be something that you wouldn't be able to figure out in the first 30 to 40 minutes of the game anyway. So I don't consider that much of a spoiler, and even with that, I'm going to try to hold back. So this section is really going to be anything out of combat and anything not to do with items. I'll probably go over the dialogue section, because by dialogue, again, I do mean the story, the voice acting, all of that. The voice acting in this game is actually very, very good. There are some named voice actors, but even the unnamed one, everyone sounds pretty good. At no point was I ever pulled out of the game because a voice actor was not up to the stuff, so to speak, and did a part poorly. In order to give you guys an idea over this, let's just listen to the conversation coming up right here. I hope it can give you guys an idea over how good the voice acting in this game can actually be.
There are children here, you fool!
We was running for our lives.
You led them straight to us, and you let them take the druid too? Unbelievable!
And who the hell are you again?
Show some respect. This man saved your pathetic life.
Well, I didn't ask for any goddamn help.
Please, you were begging me to open the gate. Anything to save yourself, you coward!
With a thump, the armored man collapses, unconscious.
Enough. The goblins have found us. No doubt the beasts will be back. We need to pack up and leave. Immediately!
So you can see there's basically nothing anyone can say bad about the dialogue in the game. The dialogue is extremely well acted, it's well done. The choices do feel very different from each other within the dialogue. You're not just giving 4 choices that lead to the same area. You can basically end up abandoning a questline early. You can end up angering someone, attacking someone pretty quickly in this game in pretty outrageous ways if you just want to go at that route. But that does lead me into one of the bad things I will say about the dialogue while we're here talking about the dialogue tree. The best way I have to put this, the best example I could possibly give you about the dialogue tree and how if you play the game for a very long time and you start noticing all the small things, the best way I can describe the plot in this game is it's a wide corridor filled with a lot of smoke. At the end of the day, you're walking into this very wide corridor, and you can go left and you can go right and you can bump into walls, but it is a linear corridor. It does lead down a straight, narrow path. If you defer too far off the main area, you'll end up back on it. Now, obviously, it is a video game. They have to tell a story. You need to go along with that story. The thing is, though, is that there's a pretty clear, the more information you get and the more you know about things, the more you'll start understanding that there are pretty clear good guys within the story and there are pretty clear bad guys about the story. And the only time you don't know if someone is a good or a bad guy is if you haven't collected enough information on them. Now, that can be a positive and that can be a negative. Some people do like situations where you can actually come out with the perfect ending. There are a lot of people who play Mass Effect 3, for example, and they like getting their perfect ending. They like that. They enjoy that. And that's, you know, more power to them. I'm not trying to take away from that. But some people can also find that a bit silly, I guess, in a way. That you oftentimes can find yourself never really having to sacrifice anything. That you can get a perfect ending if you have enough information. You can get to, you know, this is the perfect good guy. There's no ambiguity to it. In games like, I'm going to compare it to Fallout New Vegas here for a second. In Fallout New Vegas, there is some ambiguity to some of the characters. Not all of them, but there can be some ambiguity to some of the characters on whether they're good or who's good, right? They don't do it perfectly, but in New Vegas, they do try to sell you some characters as being good, some characters as being bad. Now, they, as a company of their own story that they want to tell, right? And so they do have some characters that they prefer. They look at some characters and they say, these are the good guys, right? Now, this game kind of, it doesn't even really try to paint the bad guys in a good light. At first, some of the bad guys might seem likable, but the thing is, the more you learn about them, the more you realize, oh no, they're just bad guys. And the more you look at the good guys, you realize, oh no, they're just the good guys. There is some moral ambiguities you get later and later into the game, but that starts really only occurring into Act 3 when you really break it down, right? Throughout Act 1, the biggest complaint most people will have is, and I'm sorry if there's too many spoilers, but you will be able to find out, you know, if someone is the good guy or the bad guy by doing enough investigatory work and by looking into a situation clear enough. Now, that does mean your first couple of playthroughs, you are discovering these things, and that does mean that you might not actually guess at first. The game does love to throw you curveballs all the time, but you can figure out those curveballs. Now the problem is when we go look at, for example, Mass Effect 3, and you look online and you say, which is the best ending? Oh, did the guest deserve to live or die, right? When you look at these discussions, there'll be discussions on it with people raising an argument and blah, blah, blah. Is Caesar's Legion better, or is the NCR better, or is House better, right? But in this game, there's, what's the right way to put it? I feel like once you start reaching the end of this game, and I don't think we're going to get many YouTube videos talking about the moral ambiguity of some of the characters. I don't think we're going to get, was X character right or was Y character right? There are some situations, I do think there are some situations where there will be some secondary characters who could be right or wrong, but I have to critique the dialogue here, and I have to critique the story on this one here. The more you play through the game, the more you start realizing that, yes, there actually just is a perfect run. And that if you're not going for the perfect run, you're not doing something that might be morally gray. You're not doing something that, you know, oh, I could agree with this because it's on my moral compass, right? Almost all the bad guy options are just pure bad guy options. You're not being a bad guy because, I don't know the right way to put it. You're not being a bad guy because you disagree with these actions. You're not being a bad guy because, ooh, these people are doomed or whatever. You're being a bad guy because you want to kill people. You're just murder hoboing. And the story is definitely set up in a way that murder hoboing does very much hurt you. It really does. Murder hoboing does actually end up being weaker in the long run. So then the question I guess a lot of people will be asking then is, does that give the game some replay value? If you actually can replay the game and hypothetically get to a perfect ending by knowing who's bad, knowing who's good, playing through on a druid, playing through on a paladin, playing through with detect thoughts, talk to animals, all these different options, right? If you can play through the game with all these different things and find out all this different information, and you can hypothetically get to your perfect ending where you know who the good guys are, the bad guys are, etc., do you consider that that gives the game replay value? Because you can continue to play the game until you figure all these things out for yourself. And I would have to argue that yes, in a way, that does actually give the game replay value. Because if you play through and you figure more things out by being a paladin, or if you're a druid and you figure more things out by being a druid, or if you're just a dastardly rogue and you steal some stuff and you figure some things out, that will help your overall information, and it will actually make you think, oh, the downside to this is that if you want to replay through the game and you want to be a bad guy, the issue is the bad guy route in this game is not fleshed out. And I don't mean it's not fleshed out as in, it does, obviously, people have complained that the bad guy route has less vendors. It is less people to talk to. It is less quests to do. These things are all true. But the other downside to the bad guy route is morally, it makes no sense at all. You're just murder hoboing. People do enjoy their morally gray characters. They do enjoy a bit of ambiguity, let's call it that, right? And unlike other games where the morally gray route, the bad guy route, could have some justification, or maybe you're making the tough calls, or maybe you just didn't like those people, or maybe you disagree with the game creators and actually those people didn't deserve forgiveness, you know, that sort of situation. In this game, the bad guy route is basically just going, I'm going to side with the bad guy who is just 100% evil and in the wrong. I'm going to side with them for no other reason than I just want to wreak some havoc and do some fun. And maybe that's D&D's problem, because they have the good, neutral, bad alignment system. Maybe they just wanted the game to have two choices. You could either be good or you could be evil. And that kind of hurts the replay value, because knowing what you know by the time you get to the end of the game, the unfortunate side is once you play a second game, Act 1 will be a bit, let's say, repetitive. Act 2 can get a bit cooler because there's a little bit more to do, but Act 2 is kind of a funnel act. It's sort of a filler act. In fact, I'm going to say you could practically remove Act 2 entirely, and I don't think it would actually change anything. Act 3 is when things can get a bit more interesting and you have more routes and more options to go about things. But, you know, to be blunt, the big dilemma of Act 1, the big issue with all of that, has a definite 100% correct choice and incorrect choice. Part of the problem is that the goblins, you saw them earlier. I don't know if this is spoiling it for you, but it doesn't really seem like it, considering how D&D is played. The goblins are completely irredeemable. Every goblin you meet is pure 100% evil. They aren't doing things to survive. They aren't doing things because they've been downtrodden. They aren't doing things because they've been forced out of their homes or whatever. Goblins are just pure 100% evil who are there to be evil. That is it. So if you ever tried to side with the goblins, you have the choice to do it, and maybe some people like that choice, but there's no way to, I mean, you're put into two different areas, and maybe I'm being a bit long-winded on this, but you're being put into two different areas. You can either be good or you can be evil. That's it. Now I'm going to get off this topic because I think I've said my piece on this, and yeah, they disagree or you agree with me at this point. Some people like having a pure good route where you can have everything work out well and you can be the good guy and you can solve everyone's issues. Some people enjoy that, and that's fine. This game is very much where you can be the heroic knight in shining armor and save everyone and defeat the dastardly evil people. Some people like a little bit more nuance, like me. I like a route where I can actually role play a different character who could see things potentially from a different mindset, and then I could make different choices. But I just can't do that in this game because I just can't see those different choices. But let's move on. I'm going to move on from here. Outside of the main quests, outside of the main dilemmas, do you get lots of dialogue? Yes, 100%. You get so much dialogue, and you get it with so many different characters, and you'll see Volo on screen here, who is definitely a character. You will get this dialogue, you will get this stuff, and it is so fun to listen to. It is fun to interact with these people. Sometimes when you are going through dialogue in different games, you might just skip through it because you read it and you skip through it before the character voices it. But I love listening to these characters. I absolutely adore these characters. And there are so many of them in so many different areas. You can, I mean, this is going into the dialogue here, and this is going into why a lot of things will be different. You can raise people from the dead. Not raise them from the dead, but you can talk to dead, let's say. So you can talk to dead people. You can talk to animals. You can detect thoughts. You have so many choices, and you have so many different areas to go about things. So this is why I'm saying that this will give the game some replayability, because you do need to play through the game a few times to really see these things. Or you could do one run where you are very, very meticulous. If you're an extraordinarily meticulous person, I actually think you could solve every dilemma and you could solve every little thing on your first try. Some of them are obviously meant to be solved, and some of them are obviously meant to be extremely easy. Some of them aren't, though. Those, in my opinion, are the more interesting ones, obviously. But the fact that they give you the ability to do all this is rather cool, to be honest, because why couldn't you just raise the dead? And the thing is, there are so many dead people with so many dialogue options. And this is why I'm after this huge rant of going into why I don't think the story or whatever is that amazing. Now I'm going to backtrack on that. I'm going to say, actually, there is just so much dialogue in this game. The sheer amount of it is insane. And throughout this entire rant, I'm hoping you guys are seeing the good and the bad of this game. The boring characters are the good guys and the bad guys, which is kind of an issue, obviously, that the main story is, it makes me sad to say this, but the main story is really not that interesting at the end of the day. But all the side stories, all the side characters are extremely interesting, and that's what's fun. You can have a character in Act 1 that you save, that you go into Act 2 and you do more in there, and then you go into Act 3 and you do more in there, and all of a sudden you see in Act 3 that these people you've been helping this entire time led to this entire quest line throughout the entire game and helped you out. One point in particular, people that I saved just because I felt like it. I was trying to roleplay a drow bard, and I didn't really care about, non-drow people because I'm a drow. Obviously, I'm gonna have at the very least roleplay. Even if I'm a good air quote drow, I'm good for a drow, right? And so my character had saved these groups of people throughout the entire game. I won't say which group, but by the third act, they came out, and in one of the most just out of nowhere situations, they came up and basically staged this attack that saved my character. And I was like floored. I was like, holy crap. That is what the dialogue, that is what the story does that you just would never expect. There's so many choices that lead to so many options, so many different things can happen throughout the game, and by continuing these quest lines and continuing these trees, you'll actually be amazed how many characters that you can let die early. And this is why I did this entire rant earlier, because now I'm going against it, aren't I? There are so many characters that if you make the correct choices for early on, lead to so many quest lines in Act 2 and Act 3 that you would be amazed. There is so much to do in this game that a perfect run would actually be, in its own way, fun to do, because you'd have to go through so many different characters doing so many different things. Now, with that in mind, the game totally allows you to make the wrong choices. The game allows you to make every single wrong choice, and it will continue. At no point does a game ever say, dude, what, you killed like way too many main characters, you're done, like the quest can't continue. If you kill off every main character, the game basically just goes, dude, I have no idea anymore. Just go. You'll be like, okay, what do I need to do, quest? And the quest log will just be like, dude, you screwed everything up. You screwed everything up. I don't know how you did it. I don't know how you managed to do it, but you have screwed every single thing up. And that's what I did on my first run. On my first run, me and the people I was playing with, we screwed every single thing up. Everything. I'm talking everything. It wasn't even intentional. It's just the game threw so many smokes and mirrors at us that we just screwed every single thing up. It was incredible. And the game just kept letting us play through it. By the time we were halfway through Act 2, it just felt like there was nothing left for the game to do, but it just keeps letting you go. The game just says, look, buddy, you haven't done a damn thing right. We weren't even murder hobos. It's just everyone just kept dying around us, or we weren't saving people. Or I think that's the main thing. You don't need to directly kill people to screw up. That's something very important that really I need to accentuate here. You don't need to kill people to screw up. You don't need a murder hobo to screw up. You can not save people, and that is bad. Not saving people can be bad. And I mean that quite literally. There's a lot of quest lines where you have to go out of your way to save people. There's dialogue choices where you have to go out of your way to save people. And by playing the game through a second time, you might notice that. You might notice, oh, I need to do this to save this person. And in a way, I'm now refuting my previous argument. Can it get boring? Can it get to the point where the game isn't replayable because you know about the perfect ending? Yes, but I think at the same time, it is a single-player game. It has a finite existence. You can't play through this game forever. And if you play through it enough, and if you find all the different things, plan enough classes, and you learn everything, you might actually be able to find out, what the perfect run is. And maybe shooting for that perfect run where you can save everyone is the replay value that it needs. Maybe on your 3, 4, 500th hour, you have done and you have completed your perfect save everyone run. And maybe that's what people who played these sorts of games like. Maybe they like that. Maybe they don't like the moral ambiguity. I would like moral ambiguity. I would like a best of run. That's me. I would like a run where I can do the best that I could do, but it wouldn't necessarily be a perfect run where everyone is saved. And I would have to say that, it's okay to have both sides of this coin. Maybe for me, I like the moral ambiguity. Maybe other people like having the absolutist, the ability to actually come and get the perfect ending. I know I'm dwelling on this topic, but this is basically the argument of this game, because the replayability, the replay value is in going through the game on different classes, on different roles, with different ability to talk to people, talk to dead, talk to animals, the tech thoughts, through doing different dialogue with different people, through figuring out different ways to do things, through finding out what certain people are, what certain people's motives are, learning who some people truly are. And all of that can be done in this game. And there is, I would struggle to make you believe just how much dialogue is in this game, because there is just so much dialogue. There is so much you can learn. Maybe there won't be a video on the moral ambiguity of siding with one side or the other, but there will definitely be a video. I promise you this, there will definitely be a video going over and telling you the different lore and the different reasons and the different ways you can do things. I just learned something the other day that I never thought I would find. So with that, let's move over classes and races. So, as you saw in the previous section, by being a druid, it gave me unique dialogue options that I got by being a druid. Generally speaking, those unique dialogue options will be given to you by your race, your class, and your origin. Take origin, shove that off to the side. We're going to talk about that later. That's way more complicated. Seeing as this is an RPG, and seeing as I have called this a replayable game, just how replayable is this RPG? Well, that of course depends on how much content they gave to different races and how much content they gave to different classes. Which is to say, probably a lot. Now, I have tried to make this section shorter, but if I make it shorter, unfortunately that means I can't get in all the information I want to get into this section, which is a lot of information, because I want to say in a full, let's say, review of this game and is it fun? An RPG is more fun the more times you can play through it and the more you feel that your character is sticking out as an individual in the world. How many different dialogue choices you get, how many different items you can use. I'm happy to say that for the most part, the different races can get very many different dialogue choices and some unique items for them. To compare the different races here, I'm going to go through each of them individually. I'm going to tell you guys how much content they do or do not have. First up, we have Elf. Unfortunately, we did start with Elf. Elf has High Elf and Wood Elf. Now, of course, your different races do give you different buffs here. I'm not going to go into those. I'm not going to compare about those. It's not really important for the grand scheme of thing. Elves, I'm going to be honest, don't seem to really have that much content. Elves don't have much content at all, really. I've done a run as a elf now twice, and I have very, very little elf content that I've seen. Very little dialogue choices, if any, from what I remember, and I haven't seen no unique elf items. Seems to be a little unfortunate that, especially considering they're the first one you see right there, that elves don't really get much content. But they do get their unique race features and stuff like that. They just seem to get a little bit shafted on the content. Going into more higher tides, we have Tiefling. Tiefling seems to get a lot of content, actually. Very many unique Tiefling options. People generally dislike you. You can work with that for your roleplay if you want to. There are some unique Tiefling items. There are 3 sub-races you can choose for Tiefling. Tieflings overall do seem to get a good amount of content. They do seem to get a good amount of fun. Before I go any further, I do want to say this. As I just clicked through these, it occurred to me. Yes, you can 100% edit your appearance. You can edit all of that. You can, of course, choose your skin color. Now, when you choose your skin color, you can choose to go with the what do you want to call it? The normal racial ones, or you can just go to anything. So you can go ahead and you can go do a green tiefling if you want, or you can choose to stay in the more canon skin colors and go with the tiefling like that. I just want to say that right there before I go any further and people go, do all of them have to look like that? Okay. Tieflings, they get good content, they get lots of dialogue choices. There's a lot of tieflings in the game you can talk to. A lot of stuff you can do there. Drow can give you a very, I'm not going to say totally different experience, but for roleplay value, Drow can be very, very, very different from other people. Lots of people can be very afraid of Drow. Drow are generally evil, slaving, torturing people. By default, most other races will assume you're an evil, slaving, torturing person. That's generally just how everyone will react to you. You can choose to be a good Drow, but most people will assume you are the evil kind of Drow. This allows you to get through areas without a fight, without a dialogue check, without any of that sort of stuff. So Drow can also get lots of unique dialogue options. They can figure out things that other people can't figure out. Playing through as a Drow can give you not a totally unique experience, but a different experience than other races. Humans are human. They're human. They don't really seem, they much like elves, just don't seem to get a whole lot of content for them. Elves and humans just seem to be your vanilla kind of people. I have not seen any items that only work on humans, which is weird because humans made this game. That doesn't seem to be a whole lot of human dialogue choices either. There are some, I know there are some, but realistically they're kind of rare. Githyanki, much like Drow, but Githyanki are the real winners here. Githyanki have so much content in this game. I'm not going to say they played favorites, but they 100% played favorites. Drow have unique items, Tiefling have unique items. Githyanki have like unique items, a lot of them, like a lot of unique items. Oh my god, Githyanki have so many unique items that they can use. There's a lot going on for Githyanki. You have lots of dialogue options. You have entire areas where you can be a Githyanki. Githyanki have a lot of stuff going on. So you got a lot of stuff going on here. You could do a Githyanki run after doing your normal run, and you could get a very different feeling sort of game. Just to give you some perspective, you can role play down a different, it doesn't shut off, or no race will shut off or open up different like plot routes for you, but some races might make it easier for you to go down that route, and some races might make it more sensical for you to do another run and then go down a different route. Do you get that? You might feel that this came more naturally to you. Dwarves, I'm gonna be honest with you, the way I've had it described to me feels about right. Dwarves, halflings, and gnomes. I'll go through all three of them right now. Unfortunately, it does seem like dwarves, halflings, and gnomes got the short end of the stick, that they're just considered the comic relief characters of the D&D world. I have seen some items for halflings and gnomes. I think I might have seen one for a dwarf. Dwarves do have some unique dialogue options you can go through, particularly because there is a Dwagar area, which is basically evil dwarves. There is an evil dwarf area that you go through in the game. I mean, you saw that earlier, so it's not a huge spoiler. Shocker, there might be people in the game. That's where these dwarves, right? So there are some unique dialogue choices you can do. There are some things you can do. Overall, dwarves are kind of coming up a little bit short. That's also halflings and gnomes. I'm not going to talk too much about them. Half-elves, okay. Half-elves, humans, and elves seem to have gotten the short end of the stick on this route. Sorry to say, I have not played personally through on a half-elf, but I've not seen any half-elf items. I've not seen much half-elf dialogue. I haven't seen much of that at all. I'm sure maybe there's some stuff you can do, but to be blunt, I don't think elves, humans, and half-elves play a major component of the game. They don't really, they're not really the main plot players. The main plot players are the Githyanki, the Tieflings, and the Drow. So if you want to interact the most with the plot, those are your three big ones, in my opinion. Dwarves, halflings, and gnomes also, I'm not going to make the same joke twice. So, moving on from there, you got Dragonborn. Now, Dragonborn were added last, I think. There are some unique dialogue choices. I'm going to be blunt, they kind of came up short once again. That's not a joke, that's just the reality. They get some dialogue options, not a lot. Their racial ability is terrible and bugged. And even if it wasn't bugged, it would still be terrible. Not a lot going on for Dragonborn, I'm sorry to say. But at very least, we do have 3 good races that you can play and experience a lot of. And a 4th! Yeah, that's right, the half-orc. I have played a half-orc, and it was a half-orc barbarian. Between being a half-orc and between being a barbarian, I had so many dialogue choices that I could make. I would wager between a half to a third of all dialogue had an option, not every single tree, but between talking to every single character. Oh my god, you could choose so many different choices for being a half-orc barbarian. Not specifically a half-orc who was also a barbarian, but a barbarian choice and a half-orc choice. And sometimes they even came up, you'd have a half-orc choice and a barbarian choice. If you do play a half-orc, you're playing a more kind of savage, barbarian-y, kind of tribal-esque character. You don't have to choose those dialogue choices, mind you. You don't have to, but that's generally how your character is, that's where your content is. You can, of course, do a half-orc monk, and you can role-play. You can take the monk dialogue choices. You can be calm and peaceful. You're not forced to do anything. It's just the option, the ability to do it. So I would say these are your big three. You do have 3 big races that can open up different conversations, open up different dialogue, kind of fill you in the background of the world in unique ways. There's everyone else, then there's half-orc. Half-orc I'd also put up there just because they get a lot of... Half-orc seem to have been played favorite, despite not really factoring that much into a plot, and I think there was only like 1 half-orc character in the entire game. They get a lot of conversation choices. Now, it's not to say the other races are bad. Your other races do have conversation pieces, just not as many and not as impactful. So I would say actually Githyanki, Tiefling, and Drow are your big ones. Dwarf and half-orcs are your kind of like mid-tier ones. And then halflings, gnomes, half-elf, human, and elves, they don't really seem to get the most. But that's not to say they don't get anything, they just don't get the most. If you play through on a halfling and then you play through on a gnome, you're probably going to end up feeling very similar. If you play through on a drow and a Githyanki, you're going to feel extremely different. Does everyone get that? Okay, I just need to get that across because on replayability, I assure you, you will get replayability on these 3. Even half-orc, you can kind of roleplay a half-orc barbarian. Everyone likes half-orc barbarians. I love half-orc barbarians. That's my jam. Okay? So, then on to your classes, of course. I kind of like the ginger. Sorry, sue me. Anyway, so far as classes go, you have Barbarian. What does Barbarian do? Well, let me describe this for you. I have not played D&D on the tabletop, but I have played in Baldur's Gate 3. The best way to categorize the classes in as few choices as possible. Your classes are going to go generally into damage physical, damage magical, support magical, and stealth. That's generally the 4 different ways I would categorize them. Barbarian, I'm going to say, is a damage physical class. Shocking, I know. In combat, there's lots of things you can do. There's actually so many things you can do. This game supports a lot of throwing, a lot of improvised melee weapon, a lot of picking people up. This game very much supports a barbarian who runs around and tosses people around like they're gnomes. Yeah, just a lot going on for barbarian. In combat, a lot of support to make them fun. Out of combat, there's a lot of dialogue choices for a barbarian. There's a lot of things you can do because you're a barbarian. As I said with half-orc, between half-orc and between barbarian, those 2 will actually give you a lot of dialogue choices. There's they're not like the highest end, but I would put barbarian at like the mid end for the amount of dialogue choices you can get and things like that. Now, most of your dialogue choices are going to be grrr. So, if you want to play a barbarian who's just like a strong, noble kind of character, you're not going to get much for that. If you want to play a raging maniac, you're going to get a lot of that. Replayability, I found a barbarian run pretty fun. Bard. In combat, you do have some things you can do. There are a lot of unique bard things. There's things bards can just do, right? You do have College of Swords Bard. If you don't want to be a magical support character, you can be College of Swords. That puts you more into a melee focus or ranged focus, a damage dealing, a physical damage dealing focus. So a Bard character does have some unique things they can do in combat. They do have some cool things they can do. Out of combat support, yeah, my god, Bard has a shitload of dialogue choices, a shitload of paths you can do, so many unique things you can do in combat to trick people. Obviously you're a bard, you're a performer, you do this, right? Like, if you're playing a bard and you're thinking, okay, I won't be the most useful in combat, but I just want to do funny dialogue and trick people a lot. Yeah, bard, that's you. You get so many options, you can fake your way through so many different situations. There is a lot of support for bard, a lot. For item support, there is item support for bard, I will give you that. There are not as many as for other classes, but there are some good items to support bard. But most of them kind of suck, I won't lie to you. I won't lie to you right now. Most of the items that support bard are not very good. Barbarians, I should mention, barbarians have, oh my god, the most item support in this game bar nothing, is for big weapon hitting people. And then barbarians get even more items than that. So as a total, barbarians might actually get the most item support in the entire game, now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah. Cleric. Well, I should say barbarians are playable. Bard is also very replayable. I would highly recommend doing a bard run through. It's pretty funny. Cleric. In combat, clerics have a lot of spells, a lot of things they can do. They are fun. I think people generally enjoy clerics. Out of combat support, not the most. Not the most. They can heal people. They've got a lot of things they can do in combat. Out of combat, not the most. You can see on their hit points, they're down there with Bard, it being kind of squishy. You can try to do a subclass. Now, cleric subclasses can change things pretty dramatically. Trickstery domain, you can try to do stealth funny Bard. Life domain, you can do heal spam Bard. People like that. Healing and buffing, there's a lot of item support for healing and buffing. War domain, you hit people and it does damage. Everybody get that? Okay. You also have some spell casting, spell damage Bard. Or sorry, cleric. Have I been saying Bard? Cleric. Spellcasting cleric can do pretty good as well. So as far as cleric, there's a lot of, I'm gonna say replayability, because you can play through cleric different ways. Item support, there's so much item support for cleric, you have no idea. Out of combat, not really a whole lot I've seen from cleric. Druid, kind of the anti-cleric in a way. In combat, their spells suck. They aren't very strong. Most of the time, other classes just get better versions of their spell. The best thing they can seemingly do is entangle and try to do a ranged build. Overall, their power level is quite low. So far as shapeshifting, there are items for shapeshifting. For those who play D&D, when you shapeshift, you don't use items, you just turn into something else. This can make druids quite weak because everyone else is getting all these magical items and then they shapeshift, and their shapeshifts can struggle to keep up with all these different items. There are some items that help them out. They're kind of rare, they're hard to find, they're not very common. Not a lot of support for Druid. I'm going to be honest, Druid is probably the least supported class in this entire game. They are still supported, but they're the least supported. Now, so far as out of combat, there are a lot of dialogue choices, a lot of things you can do as a Druid. Now, they're not the only class that can talk to animals, but they can talk to animals, which is kind of unique. I'm not going to say unique to them, actually. What's the right way to put it? They can just talk to animals by default, because they're a Druid. So they can always do that. There's so much you can do when talking to animals in this game, by the way, which is something I might get into later, but there's a lot of support for talking to animals. Item support is pretty low. Out of combat support is decent. I would put it mid to high. There's a lot of druid choices, a lot of things you can do. It's just in combat, they're not really that interesting. Replayability, doing a druid run might be interesting. They're not bad. You'll find right at the start of the game there is a Druid Grove. There's a lot you can do in the Druid Grove. You can talk to a lot of people. Now, you are not from that Druid Grove, so don't think you can just like waltz in and be like, I'm a Druid too. And everyone's like, Druid high five. Yeah, like that's not how it's gonna go. Okay? Fighters are basically the anti-bard. I'm gonna put it that way. In combat, there is so much they can do. There's so much item support. There's so much. You will trip, and by the time you can get up, you'll have found 3 more items for doing big damage. There's so much heavy armor in this game as well. It's kind of nuts. There's so much that Fighter can do. Fighter can just do anything and everything they want. They are amazing. There's no downside to playing Fighter. Period. Actually, Fighter is just so good. A lot of content. Out of combat support, not the most out of combat support. I'm gonna be blunt with you. There's not many dialogue options for fighters. There's not much for a fighter to do. There are some things, I'm sure, and there are some things you can do, I'm sure. It's just like, obviously, like a bard, there's just gonna be more Larian can do to make a bard out of combat and dialogue be interesting than fighty man. Not even angry fighty man. Just fighty man. Replayability, decent. You will have Lae'zel on your team. That's one of the companions. You'll find her pretty early. She's a fighter, so if you get your fill of running up and bashing people with a weapon with Lae'zel, then playing again on a fighter is probably not going to give you an interesting new playstyle. So realistically, I would say fighters actually don't have the most replay. Monk. There are no monk companions, and monks have a lot of unique stuff. Replayability, pretty high. In combat support, yeah, there's actually a lot of items. There's a lot of things you can get on monk. They are probably one of the most supported playstyles to go unarmed monk. Punching people is so supported. Stabs and whacking people with a big stick is also pretty supported. Not as much as unarmed, but there's a lot of support going on here for monk. There's a lot of support going on here for monk. So that, yeah, there's a lot going on for monk is all I can say. Replayability, pretty decent, but monk can get kind of boring by the mid game. That's just my opinion. Eventually you'll reach a point where you're kind of just doing the same combos over and over. That's not to say, I mean, you'll keep finding new items. You'll keep finding new things to do. Just can get a bit dragging, so to speak. Paladin, okay, so Paladin is 3 different subclasses. I should say, by the way, monk can also do stealthy monk. Monk can also do, oh god, I forgot to mention subclasses. Monk can do a stealthy monk. He can also do a spellcasting monk. Punchy monk is generally the best. And the other 2, I'm not saying they're bad. But yeah. Druid can also do a necromancer druid, where he like spores people and brings them up to life with spores. It has stuff. It doesn't really seem to have any items for it. It has some for sure. It's not very supported. It turns on at level 6, which is way too late in my opinion. I don't know how they justify taking till level 6 to get your defining feature on Spore Druid. It's ridiculous. Overall, it's very weak. Not really a lot there. I would not recommend you replay just to try Spore Druid, especially because it turns on so late. Most of all, you're just gonna be going Druid to Shapeshift. That's about it. So far as Paladin, on the other hand, your different oaths give you different rules. You can try to do a roleplay run where you run through as a different oaths and try to oath things. There are 3 different oaths. They do change things. They do have different skills at different paths. There are subclasses for basically everyone, by the way. So just keep that in mind. There are different subclasses for all the different classes. Paladin, you can just choose them right away. They are, I mean, obviously, Oath of Devotion is kind of your tanky paladin. Oath of Vengeance is your damage paladin. Oath of Ancients is your healing paladin. It kind of goes from there. You also have a 4th, the Oathbreaker paladin, which is your like unholy necromancer dark knight paladin. He's pretty cool. You can also try to keep your oaths. All the different oaths, for those of you paladin lovers, they all have different rules. You can break your oath by not following the rules. Okay, I kind of like this white and blue. That's like a really neat looking color scheme. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, Paladins, out of combat, like how much combat do they have? They have a lot of, I'm gonna be blunt, I think Paladins are the most interesting class, the most powerful class too. They have so much dialogue options they can go through for being a Paladin. They have so many items that support them and different playstyles they do. They can dip in and get the vast array of fighter items, or they can dip in and get the absolutely vast array of healing items, or they can dip in and try to go for the tanking items, the shield items. There is so much that Paladin can do. On the other end, we have Ranger. Now, Ranger can be a stealthy Ranger. You can do your Stealth Archer Ranger. That is very much supported. You can be a Ranger that runs on with a bear. That's also very much supported. You can also be a Ranger that just shoots people, I guess, and casts spells. They're like a weird half-caster thing. They're not very popular. They're not very strong. They're not very supported either. On the other hand of Monk, Monk is kind of a niche, low popularity character with 9 billion items to support them. Ranger doesn't. Range weapons in this game, there are range weapons. They do things. They're not very common. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Not really a whole lot going on here for Ranger. Sorry to say, I just don't think Ranger has a lot of content. As far as auto content, they don't really seem to have a lot auto content. There's not like a Rangers Guild or anything that I know of. There might be. Maybe there is. Overall, I just don't see a lot of content. Rangers are... They shoot. They have a pet. Do you guys get it? Okay. There's not really that much more going on here, unfortunately. Rogue. Okay, now Rogue is unique. I did mention all the different stealth people. Rogues do stealing, they do pickpocketing, they do stealth. Is there replayability for Rogue? I forgot to mention replayability for Paladin. Paladin, I would 100%. Paladin replay is great. Ranger, I wouldn't recommend a replay. Rogue, would I recommend a replay for Rogue? Yes and no. They do have a playstyle that is very unique, the stealth playstyle, and it is somewhat supported. I'll give you that. The problem is it might not be the most fun. Just because something has support doesn't make it always the most fun. To be blunt, no matter which area you go to, there will always be a stealth backdoor entrance. There will always be one. And because of that, it will always give you something that you can do. Do you understand that? There's always going to be something that you can do as a rogue. You can try to assassinate people before combat. There are like prisons. You can break people out of prison. There's lots of stealthy stuff. But at the end of the day, just smashing in, killing everyone is just as good. Is it easy? No. Being a rogue is definitely easier. Smashing through and killing everything is probably the hardest way to play this game, to be blunt. So, Rogue definitely has some stuff. Are they supported by items? Yes, there's lots of items that support Rogue. You'll find lots and lots and lots of items that help and support Rogue. Will you, have a unique playstyle? Also, yes. Is it the most fun? If it's what you're into. It's not what I'm into. So replayability, high. Sorcerer and Wizard, they're the same class. They're just slightly different. They could basically be subclasses of each other. Sorry, but not sorry. I know a lot of people are going to go into the comments. They're going to write me angry. That's not true. You're an idiot. Fuck you. Yeah, whatever. Sure. Why not? Okay. Sorcerers, they are definitely there. Yep. Wizards are also there. They cast spells, they do spell stuff. Do they have unique dialogue and stuff? Yeah, sure. Fine. Yeah, I guess. I find them boring. I'm gonna be blunt. I don't really like mages either, so I'm kind of gonna skip past them because I'm gonna be blunt with you. I just don't like them. That's my personal preference. Warlock. Okay, Warlock is cool. Warlock can either do kind of this ranged Warlock where they spam Eldritch Blast, or they can pact with a weapon and kind of become a glass cannon melee character. They're pretty good. They're pretty unique. They definitely have some replayability. Do they have unique items and support for them? Also, yes. Actually, they do. They do have they have some packed weapons you can find throughout the game. I don't think they're going to be better than just pacting to other weapons, but they do have some unique packed weapons. They do have some cool stuff they can do. Overall, I'm going to be blunt. I think Warlocks are cool. They might not be different enough that you'd want to do an entire new run, like, as a Warlock, but they do some cool stuff. For dialogue choices, they have some cool stuff they can do. They can interact with one of the companions a little bit more. So there's actually some cool stuff to Warlocks. So in this very, very long rant here, I hope you can understand that as an RPG, Warlock and Elf will have many, many different things that they can do. Does everybody get that? Okay, I hope we all understand this because I'm trying to get everyone to understand this is an RPG with a lot of different races and a lot of different classes and a lot of different uniqueness and a lot of different replayability you can do. So far as Origins. Okay, so I've now been editing all day and I've only just now gotten to Origins. I assure you this game has so much replayability. I can doubt myself while making this video. I can go up and down, but the one thing I will tell you, oh my god, this game has so much content. As we finally get to Origins, we talk about your class and we talk about your race. What is the third thing I mentioned? Origin. What origin are you? I'm going to play Gale's introduction while I talk about this. You don't necessarily need to hear him, you just need to see the introduction. So these are your companions. These are who will follow you around. These are who you will do their companion side stories for. These are generally the characters that will add some interesting content to the mid game and the late game by fleshing out their stories, you know, finishing their backgrounds, finding all their special gear, etc. The difference between this game and in fact, I think pretty much every other game I've ever seen in my life, is you can play as the origin characters. You can play as the companions. That allows you to get unique dialogue options only available to that character. That allows you to do some things that were only available if you played as that character, which is kind of ridiculous when you really break it down. I do believe you can do most of the things if you have the character as your companion, but being able to play as a character, being able to get their unique dialogue options you actually wouldn't otherwise be able to get is rather interesting. Now, of course, they're locked into a race, they're locked into a class. You can actually respect them in-game if you're playing as them, but you are this character. Now, what does that mean? You can get some unique buffs that this character could get that you, not playing this character, couldn't get. For example, Asterion can do some, well, I'm not going to try to spoil it, but he can do some unique funny things due to his, well, background. Lae'zel can get some funny things. Gale is a funny dude. Shadowheart can get some unique things. Will, all of them. With all these 6 origin characters, you can replay the game through in a complete, I shouldn't say completely new look, but in a new look. How would it be to play through the game as Karlach? How would it be to play through the game as Shadowheart? You've seen them on your side, you've seen them as your companions, but what are their dialogue? What are they thinking? What are their choices? And you can do that. And this does open out another route to play through the game. But there is one origin. In addition to the custom origin, there's another origin that you're probably not even noticing. The Dark Urge. What is the Dark Urge? Is the Dark Urge a race? No, you can choose anything for the Dark Urge. Is he a class? No, you can choose anything for the Dark Urge. So what is the Dark Urge? The Dark Urge is the Dark Urge. You remember nothing but a path paved with blood. Unimaginable cruelty whispers to you from within. Can you escape it? Would you even want to? The Dark Urge is what I believe, and what many believe, to be the canon playthrough. You play through this game with the Dark Urge. Voices whispering at you. Dark deeds that you must do. You can get power with the Dark Urge by killing off main characters. You can get options, dialogue choices, things that you could only get by playing as the Dark Urge. This could screw up your campaign, or it could get you really cool items and things that you might actually want. This is another playthrough. Does it completely change the game? No. Much like the other Origin characters, you will not completely change the game, but you will meet new characters. You will get another plotline. You will get, effectively, another backstory. And isn't that cool that this is included? After you're done with the main game, after you've done your run, you can go back and you can now play through as the Dark Urge. So that is, once again, another attribute to the game, another way to replay the game that they added. So you have your race, your class, and your origin. You can choose to be custom, you can choose to be Dark Urge, or you can choose to be one of the 6 companions. That's a lot of replay value. That's a lot. That's just a lot of replay value right there, and something that really is pretty cool. And I just want to emphasize here, much like you saw dialogue choices for Paladin and Druid and stuff like that, you get unique dialogue options for like Lae'zel, for Gale, for Shadowheart. Once again, by playing as these characters, you can figure things out and you can do things so that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise, which is neat. One final little piece I want to put onto this puzzle is the fact that this game comes for $60. You get the entire game. You're not going to be nickeled and dimed. You're not going to have anything locked behind paywalls or anything like that. In the past, this would maybe be something that I wouldn't even feel the need to mention, but lately, especially with some other games trying to hide so much of their content behind paywalls, this game doesn't. You do have a $10 DLC upgrade, and this is a one-time upgrade for cosmetics. It gives you digital character sheets and some other stuff. That's about it. The only cosmetic it really gives you is down here, there's the Divinity Pack with the cape. That's about it. Other than that, there's not really anything within Baldur's Gate 3 that you can buy. Now, this is a positive, and it's also a negative. This can also be seen as a negative, and I'm going to explain how. Their previous games, which sold very positively and did very well, also did not have DLC. They merely had cosmetic packs, the soundtrack, and Sir Laurel the Squirrel, which is complicated, it's stupid. The problem with this, that I would actually argue, the problem with this is that this can be, in a way, frustrating. Because no matter how good the game is, they will not add DLC. It is both their strongest attribute and oftentimes their weakest attribute. They want to keep their games so pure, and they want to keep their games free from the ability to be corrupted, I guess, if you put it that way, that they actually can hurt themselves by not adding more content into the future on the game. However, this does mean you will not be nickeled and dimed on this game. For a mere $60, that's right, for $60, you get a lot of content. A lot of content. You get an unbelievable amount of content. I just wish, me as a player, I really wish this company would revisit their policy. I think an expansion pack to this game would be absolutely incredible. They don't need to nickel and dime. They don't need to do cosmetics. I think that this game, if given the opportunity to have an expansion pack with maybe some classes, some subclasses, maybe some homebrewed stuff, new items, new areas, new plot lines, I think this game would do significantly better. In fact, as good as it is now, I think it could be even better. I think the last area I will visit now before I do a conclusion on this whole thing is the graphics of the game. The game is gorgeous. I think we could all agree on that. It is a gorgeous game. It has gorgeous art. It is extremely good looking. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people have noticed this, the optimization is not 100%. My end, I have a 4080, and unfortunately, even with all that raw processing power, I need to run a maximum frame cap of 60. I do, of course, record it. I do stream it. So that is for my own end, but even with a maximum frame cap of 60, I do run into constant issues. I had to eventually disable shadow, cloud, and fog quality as low as I could go because it was just offering me so many issues, these different things. The game still can often have some errors on me. So I have to have a 60 frame cap. I have to put some of the options onto low, and I still run into issues. Not all the time, for sure. 90% of the time, this game runs pretty well. That last 10%, though, it seems to have some really large issues. And I feel like it's worth bringing up because it's not a small thing. Even for me, I ran through Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and for me, Act 3 didn't seem that bad. At the very least, not worse compared to the previous acts and how many times the game would start hiccuping. Other people have run into some issues on Act 3. Me personally, I have not. Just issues the whole way around, which that's not necessarily a good thing, mind you. It's not necessarily a good thing to say, oh yeah, I've just had issues the whole time though, which, yeah, and I think it bears saying, I think it bears reminding people this game still does have some issues, and it's not a perfectly run, perfectly formatted, it's not a perfectly coded game. There are some performance issues that many people are having. All good things must come to an end, including this video. As we come to the end of this video, as I start to do a conclusion, I decided to write a list of positives and negatives that I could go over. On the positive side, which I'll go over first, the one thing I want to emphasize is there is so much content in this game. Elden Ring, I got to about 100 hours before I started to feel the repetitivity, and I started to feel that it was, it had some serious flaws that were hurting my ability to continue to enjoy it. Elden Ring still had 100 hours of extremely strong content, in my opinion. I would still call Elden Ring a very good game for that first 100 hours. Baldur's Gate, I would say, has a strong 150 to 200 hours of very solid content. Now, I'm not weighing a game based on how much time you can play with it. A game that has an amazing 20 hours will still have an amazing 20 hours. Baldur's Gate has an extraordinarily strong, I want to say for the first 150 hours, it is extraordinarily strong. There is so much to do, so much to talk to, so much to see. There is so much to play in this game. I think many people could get to 200-300 hours before they really start to feel things locking in, so to speak. This game is enormously replayable. Classes feel strong to play, except mages. What they have done, and I wanted to emphasize this because I didn't talk about it too much in the item thing, a lot of the classes that are weaker at scaling, or a lot of the playstyles that maybe aren't the best, they have put out items for. They have strengthened with different things. Tavern Brawler was changed to make it a bit stronger. They added a ring, which adds a D4 to throwing damage. They maybe went a bit too far, and Tavern Brawler throwing might be a little bit too much right now, but they put effort into making sure that those weaker playstyles were still viable, even if on the tabletop they maybe weren't up to snuff. Monks got some looks at them. They did some cool things with ranger pets as one example. They did some cool things with necromancers as one example. They tried to do some things. Classes that are weak can still have decently cool items around there. It feels very good to play this game. I'll put it that way. Marshals might feel a little bit overpowered, but they also feel about right. They feel about what they should be. It's a weird feeling, and it's hard to describe, really. Marshals feel overpowered, and yet it feels good to play them. You feel, yes, this is what I should be doing. This is where I should be, because I am amazing. It's hard to describe, really, but classes just feel very strong to play. And to emphasize on this, itemization shores up so many weaknesses. On the tabletop, pure healing might not be the best way to play the game, but in this game, pure healing can be an extremely powerful way to play the game. A cleric can carry the group by just giving AoE heals and AoE blesses and doing all this stuff, and it can just feel enormously satisfying and powerful to play through this. You can do many, many different things in many, many different ways in this game, and I think as more people find more items, because definitely there's more out there to find. There's more playstyles to find. There's more ways to do things. You can mod this game, and that is something that I haven't brought up. You can mod it for difficulty. You can mod it to add in, hell, more players that you can have in the game. You can actually play 8-player co-op. And that's something that I want to, that's one thing I definitely need to mention that bears mentioning. All the footage that you guys saw, not all of it, but much of the footage that you guys saw was in multiplayer. Much of that combat footage was multiplayer to show you that they did a lot of work to make sure that even though it's turn-based, that the multiplayer can flow pretty smoothly and be pretty fun. I think the multiplayer is definitely a positive. It is definitely something that bears mentioning. The multiplayer system is pretty, I'm not going to say it's perfect. It's not 100% perfect, but it is pretty good. I have not seen any desyncs. I've not seen any issues whatsoever. It works. I've played many games now in multiplayer, and it is definitely a strength of this game. If you get you and 3 friends and you can agree, you know, obviously who runs up and talks to people, and you don't just troll each other to death for fun, multiplayer can be a very satisfying experience, especially if you guys are new to the game. You don't quite know that the game is throwing you curveballs on different things. You don't quite know who's trying to trick you, so to speak. The game can be very satisfying that way. There are so many interesting things to do. There's so many interesting things to do that people over-level themselves and end up making the game so easy just because they don't want to miss anything, because everything's interesting to do. Very rarely do you get to a point, in fact, I would say you almost never get to a point where you think to yourself, damn, I'm such a high level, I just kind of want this game to wrap up. The only time I felt that was late into Act 3 when I was like, okay, let's just go kill the final boss or do the final area or whatever it was. And let's just wrap this game up because, you know, it's starting to drag. I only felt that like way late into Act 3. Other than that, you will continue to want to do things the entire game because there's so much voice acting, there's so much content, there's so many things you can do that it just is enormously satisfying for everyone. There's so many interesting people to talk to. And then goes into this top thing right here, but it's just true. So many characters have so many good voice actors that it can just be very funny to talk to people. Even the evil characters can be funny to talk to. Even the characters that are deranged can be funny to talk to because you meet them for the first time and you go, wow, would you look at that? And going with that, the voice acting is just completely top tier. You will never find a game with just more perfect voice acting. I cannot think of a single character that has been voiced in this entire game where I think to myself, wow. There are some issues with the voice acting at certain points. You can tell that characters had their voices recorded in different rooms in certain points. I won't say that it's perfect. I won't say it's absolutely perfect. You can tell sometimes. The unfortunate downside is that COVID did happen and some of this voice acting did need to actually be recorded in different rooms, which is apparent sometimes, not all the times, very rarely in fact. You can tell which characters had it happened to them. I'm not going to say it, but some of the characters you can tell came back in to re-record lines or to record new lines for the characters. Again, it does not happen often. I just remembered it, and in the spirit of being completely unbiased, I felt that it was worth mentioning. As for the negatives in the game, let's look at the negatives that I wrote out. you can figure out the good guys. No matter how many people want to do a perfect run, no matter how many people want to save the universe and save all the good guys and figure out all the bad guys and punch Satan in the face, it's not always a good thing that you can do a perfect run. That, in my opinion, is not a good thing. There should be some ambiguity. You should have to leave some people out to dry. You shouldn't be able to solve every single problem and help everyone in the best way possible. It is, in my opinion, a problem. Act 1 can be repetitive once you do figure out who the good guys are. Once you figure them out, and once you figure out how much some characters just aren't, like, redeemable, it can make Act 1 that you're gonna play it this way because this is just the best way to play through it. This is the only real way to play through it, in fact. I do want to add on to that, though. Again, you're going to be at 100 hours playtime before you maybe even start to think about this, okay? I want to say that because, you know, some people might take this the wrong way. There are some performance issues. I'm going to add this, by the way. There are performance issues. People have experienced them. There are some problems. And definitely in Act 3, I've heard more than a few complaints about the performance in Act 3. Mages have been left out to dry. I'm going to call this an actual negative because it is, in my opinion, an actual negative. Mages did not get enough gear. As a person who's played through this game a lot, at present, I do not feel any desire to go play a mage, to do mage options. You can see at certain points they were trying to push some mage gear. Like, there's some cool poison gear, there's some cool cold gear, there's a lot of cool fire gear, but there doesn't feel to be enough of it to really do a build, and it's so rare and hard to find that sometimes I can't even remember where all the gear is. I was trying to do a poison wizard for one of my runs. I was going to make my Gale a poison wizard, and then I started to think to myself, I can't even remember where all the poison gear is. Mages just got left out to dry, and there's too much heavy armor and two-handed weapons. I'm going to be blunt on this. In Act 1, you can get mega super rare heavy armor, and then you go into Act 2, and the mega super rare heavy armor you got is better than everything from Act 2, but there's just still so much heavy armor in Act 2 anyway. Heavy armor, which is like not used by everyone, seems to get more than everyone else combined. It's bizarre, to be frank with you. There was very much a clear bias on this. I'm going to actually complain about it. Almost every single piece of armor that drops that's super rare is heavy armor. Almost every piece of it. I'm gonna say it's actually kind of absurd. There's also way too many two-handed weapons. Now, you could say there's not enough other weapons, that actually there are enough two-handed weapons. They just should have added more of other weapons. I could agree either way, but right now, you could run a full 4-man party. I shit you not, you could run a full 4-man party of two-handed weapon users and you would be fine. On the other hand, if you ran 2 mages focusing on damage, 2 damage mages would actually start tripping over each other and you would run out of gear to give to both of them. It's kind of silly. You could have a full heavy armor, two-handed weapon party running around and you would still be fine. But 2 mages and you would run out. So what would I say about this game? What's my total score? I give it a 2 thumbs up. You should definitely go buy this game out of 10. Is that a score? No. But the thing is, I think I would have to, if I was forced to do it, I would give Baldur's Gate a 10 out of 10. Maybe a 9 out of 10. Is any game perfect? No. Is Baldur's Gate perfect? Also no. Is it fair then to give it a 10 out of 10? Probably. Because I'm going to make this argument. I don't think we'll ever see a perfect game. It literally can't be done. And Baldur's Gate comes pretty close to it. It comes pretty close to giving you enough content and fun things to do. I want to especially mention here, with so many interested people to talk to, all these companions, I have not done every companion quest line yet. I hope you guys really, really piece together how much I have not done in this game. There is so much that I have not done in this game. So much. And I think that alone says it. I'm 200 hours in, and I feel to myself like I have not done so much content. I want to do a second run through, actually, where I help the same group of people, because they're one of the only people with a moral dilemma. And I'm not going to spoil it, but I wouldn't let them kill someone. And you know what? I wonder if this is a positive. I passed a persuasion check to not let them kill someone, and they agreed they wouldn't kill him. But they also got so pissed at me that they were being forced to let him live that they denounced me. And I thought to myself, damn, they feel so strong. It was one of the only moral dilemmas I've ever had in this game. The only one. And this is why I liked them so much. They hated this person. They said he was so evil. But I just thought to myself, it wasn't fair, right? And I persuaded them to let him down. And they got so mad at me. And I want to play through again, and I want to see what happens if I go the other way. Just the other day, I figured out a new way to save one of the characters. I'm not going to say who, but I found a new way to save one of the characters that no one actually knows how to save yet. And I'm pretty proud of that one. So, oh my God, there's so much. I think, oh God. And when I say there's so much content, what I really mean is you can figure out so many different ways to do things, so many different dialogue checks, so many different things you can do. I literally cannot emphasize this enough. I cannot figure in words how to express enough how many different things there are to do in this game, especially because I'm doing a spoiler-free video. So you're going to have to take my word for it, okay? So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you all for being here. Thank you, everybody. And I hope all of you have a great rest of your day.